30th, first bloom, year 264, the third age, sundown. We arrived at the edge of the far wood mid-morning. The woods were massive, dark, and seemed to endlessly stretch towards the mountains. As we approached, I couldn't shake this feeling in my stomach. I knew the risks, the rumors of this place. They say no one leaves the far wood. We stopped at the edge of the trees before dismounting. Dominic, seeing his escort mission was complete, left us to ride back to Falsey. It was relieving seeing him ride away from this place. After days of paranoia, fearing the woods would swallow him, I let my guard down. I shouldn't have. We released the horses, but found the woods too dense to simply walk through. It is almost as if these trees formed a wall, barely room to slip your fingers between them. This continued even at the river, where the trees still proved too thick to pass, and boats were made impossible as the trees formed a sort of natural dam. We were discussing our options, musing about climbing the trees or flying over them, until a swarm of birds flew out of the woods. They ignored us completely, instead descending on Dominic as he rode. We didn't understand what was happening until we heard us screaming. I tore open a rift in the weave and was there in seconds. I thrust my hands into the whirlwind of razor-sharp beaks and claws, desperately trying to pull him from the swarm. My hands were cut to ribbons by their talons, and just as quickly as they descended upon him, they dissipated. But Dominic was no longer on his horse. The birds retreated over the trees once more, and Dominic Wynrell was taken by the farwood. I couldn't begin to comprehend what had happened. I let my guard down, and my negligence now meant that he was at the mercy of Granny Nightshade. He had made a deal with her some time around the start of the third age, after the fall of Adris. He wished to be forgotten by the world, and so she saw he was. There isn't anyone alive now who still remembers the man called Dominic Wynrell, except for me. And no doubt this is her way of ensuring I enter the farwood. This was the very reason I so vehemently objected to him escorting us. I knew this would happen, but no matter what I said, Dominic wouldn't believe me. He couldn't defy orders from the general, but General Mariano had no idea what he was sending Dominic to do. But that no longer mattered now. I had to follow, I knew it. This is exactly what Granny Nightshade wants. Eventually, with moderate difficulty, we climbed our way inside, but we discovered we were not alone. Nakai was almost led away from us by a lone, pale hand. We found a strange creature seemingly made of root and moss sitting in the middle of the path. Nothing seemed to come from either of these events, but we did not linger to find out what these things were. We soon began to find ruins, signs that this place was probably once a series of settlements, now devoured by the creeping trees and gnarled roots of the farwood. Eventually we stumbled onto a gravel path that led to the remains of an old stone church. It seemed as though it caught fire at some point. We found a child's bones in the bell tower, and more skeletons in the cellar. Curiously, Brina smelled poison on the air. Yet the skeletons in the cellar looked as though they were there for decades. Even more strange was the sort of music box playing on its own. We didn't stay to investigate further, however. A scream from the tree line, and the discovery of a freshly impaled corpse on a tree sent us moving along rather quickly. Though the person we found impaled looked rather strange, well, apart from being impaled on a tree. The skin looked as though it was growing bark and moss, and the tree they were impaled on was oozing this viscous golden sap. Leaving that horrific scene behind us, we followed our best estimation of north, and eventually found another gravel path, this time leading us to what looked like an abandoned house. It was quickly approaching sundown, at least as far as we could see through the thick canopy, and we'd hoped staying here would increase our chances of surviving the night. The insight was good enough. We found a room to barricade ourselves inside of, and warded the house for protection. There's clear signs of something attacking the house at some point, and we found another skeleton in the cupboard. Hopefully whatever it was won't come back. My lack of a need for sleep will hopefully prove useful here, so the others can rest. Something tells me we will need it for the days ahead.